Whose character so they?
Let's have to enjoy this one.
Usual suspect.
Oh, yeah.
Greatest trick the Ned ever pulled is convincing the world he didn't exist. Right?
Oh my God. No, you're the only person out of line here, though. Okay.
He's backing on both sides.
Perfect.
Hello. Tonight I'd like to tell you a story about a man named John Igor Morris. For these purposes, we'll just call him Jim. Now, Jim was a Villanova graduate, and he filled his time and his life by his job, his family, his dog, and his passion for volunteering. Now, he volunteers for many organizations, which include his church, community youth group, animal shelter, and the NAACP. Now, Jim has never been in love, but he feels he lives a very happy life. So much so that on his 21st birthday, his friends, recognizing that Jim rarely does things for himself and he's always working for others, that they decide that they get him an all-expenses-paid weekend to Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. Now, Jim loves food and stage shows, but he also enjoys some online poker, so his friends thought it would be the perfect gift for him. Now, he goes to the weekend, he takes in a few shows, he indulges in the phenomenal buffets, but before he goes to bed, he decides to try his hand at the poker table. So, let me tell you, Jim went on a hot streak. He was winning like a madman. And so when you win like that, they give you complimentary drinks of your favorite cocktail. His happens to be apple martinis. Now, like many high rollers, he finds himself flirting with the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. From this, he loses focus on the poker, and he even loses interest. So he starts to lose all his winnings, but he breaks even. And Jim is fine with this, and he's very happy, because he was happy just to play, and now he can spend more time with his new friends. Jim never felt a connection like this before. And let me tell you, Jim wasn't sure if it was the Appletinis, but he's a die-hard romantic. He thought that he was experiencing love at first sight. And he thinks he'd finally met his soulmate. So, Jim decides to throw inhibition to the wind and takes Sarah, that's her name, back to his room. After a night of passionate lovemaking, as Jim could only describe as dancing on a chocolate-covered rainbow, Jim is abruptly awoken by his beloved Sarah. But to his fright, he's also awoken by a grisly man named A-Train, who's demanding $2,000 and that he has 24 hours to pay. Jim learned a hard lesson today. He learned that the girl of his dreams was not actually that. Instead, she was a prostitute, and that A-Train was her pimp, and that he was going to break his thumbs if he did not pay them the amount of money. To make matters worse, Jim has developed a burning sensation when he urinates, and this Sunday, he has to teach his Sunday school class about premarital sex.
Thanks, Andrew. For many men and women, religion is a significant factor in determining when they should begin having sexual relations. Chastity is a virtue expected on the faithful of many religions, including Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Jews. This virtue of chastity usually includes refraining from sex until you're married and faithfulness to your marriage partner. In many religions, some groups of people are even expected to practice celibacy, which is refraining from sex completely and not ever being able to get married. These groups mostly include nuns and monks in Christianity and priests in the Roman Catholic Church. From the Roman Catholic perspective, everyone is called to chastity, whether they are married, single, or in a religious order. However, sex with one spouse is not against chastity, so as long as both remain open to having children. And contraceptives violate this true chastity. In Christianity, sexual intercourse is meant to take place within the context of marriage. Refraining from sex is therefore expected of unmarried people. But for married couples, the Apostle Paul wrote that they should not deprive each other of sex, only for a short amount of time each day for prayer. However, it should be borne in mind that historically, the Christian ideal was of celibacy and not chastity. These ideas were brought on by Christian anarchists until the 17th century, and they still practice this today. God has not been silent on the subject of chastity, and He has spoken on premarital sex and sexual relations. He has not been vague when He has spoken about this subject in the Bible. From Corinthians chapter 7, verse 1. Now concerning the things of which he wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 3, but fornication and all uncleanliness or covetousness, let it not even be named among you, as it is fitting for saints. In Corinthians chapter 6, verse 18, flee sexual immorality. Every sin that a man does is outside the body, but he who commits sexual immorality sins against his own body. And in Timothy chapter 2, verse 22, flee also youthful lusts. Judaism also forbids intercourse outside of marriage. This is termed zenith, or promiscuity. But it has no ideal chastity for religious groups, because they actually encourage rabbis and other religious leaders to get married. Refrain from sex is practiced when a woman is menstruating and the week after a cessation of flow, as well as a set period after childbirth. Islam is also another religion that forbids intercourse outside of marriage. However, they maintain that celibacy as an act of piety is wrong because it discourages sex. And marriage for all those who are able is encouraged. Similar to Judaism, the exclusion of sexual practices is practiced during the time of women's menstruation and on fasting days such as Ramadan. In many Hindu traditions, such as Brahmacharya and Vedanta, they also discourage sex outside of marriage. Hindus place a great emphasis on chastity as a way of harnessing the energy of the body and the mind towards the goal of spiritual realization. In males, the semen is considered sacred, and its preservation is considered essential for the development of essential intellectual and spiritual capacities. In the Vedanta tradition of Hinduism, the Brahman and the ego personality are at odds with each other, and desires which center around satisfaction are associated with the ego self, and these bring suffering and problems to yourself and the world around you. And sex outside of marriage is included in one of these problems. You should agree, God is clear, and there's absolutely no gray areas in God's teaching on remaining sexually inactive outside of marriage. Granted, many Christians today face many pressures from the outside world, such as the common belief that if everybody's doing it, I can do it too. But I'll leave you with the words of the pastor of the Wolfboro Bible Church. He says, yes, even Christians have swallowed the lie of the devil. It's okay because everybody is doing it. But no, it's not okay. The Bible says, flee sexual immorality, flee youthful lust. I see no room in God's Word for lingering around or testing out sexual immorality. Do you? Christians that try to convince themselves that God will permit sexual activity outside of marriage have ignored God's Word and have deceived themselves. Although religion is a primary factor, many heed the warnings of their religions, and unfortunately must deal with an unwanted pregnancy. BJ?
Thanks, Brian. Maybe the most pertinent issue in the discussion of premarital sex is pregnancy. Contraceptives are the most common used method to ward off unwanted pregnancies. According to Health24.com, there are 3 different categories of contraceptives and several different types of contraceptives within each category. The first category of contraceptives is called the barrier method. According to Health24.com, barrier contraceptives physically block the access of sperm to a woman's uterus and fallopian tubes. They include the diaphragm and cervical cap, the male and female condoms, and the spermicides in the form of foams, creams, and gels. The second type of contraception is called the hormonal method. Again, Health24.com tells us these contraceptives are for women and include oral contraceptive, commonly known as the pill, as well as hormonal injections, implants, and vaginal rings, all containing synthetic hormones. Their method of action is to stop the ovaries from producing eggs monthly and or to keep the cervical mucus thick so that the sperm cannot easily pass through it. The third and final category is simply called other contraceptives, and these include IUD and emergency methods such as the morning after pill. Although there are many options for contraceptives, each one of them has its own flaws, and none of these are 100% efficient. Unwanted pregnancies that occur to couples who are not ready to deal with the ramifications of a sexual relationship, especially in teens, can ruin lives. If the contraceptive fails, then couples are faced with one of the hardest decisions that anyone should ever have to make, either to have an unwanted child or to have an abortion. The first option is to have an unwanted child. According to SafeMotherhood.org, there are an estimated 200 million pregnancies a year around the world. Now, out of these 200 million pregnancies, 1/3 or 75 million pregnancies a year are unwanted. There's no situation in which having an unwanted child turns out to be morally justifiable or fair for the couple or, moreover, for the child. From the parent's standpoint, having an unwanted child can mean putting their lives plans on hold, including the idea of getting a higher education and the career they always dreamed of. From a child's standpoint, being born to parents who never wanted them can have severe life effects. According to birthpsychology.com, and forgive my grammar because the experiment was done in Sweden, so it was translated roughly, so I know how to speak English, but this is going to be a little choppy. In Gothenburg, Sweden, 120 children unwanted were matched with 120 controls, which were wanted children of the same sex. Individuals unwanted at conception, unwanted during gestation, and delivered after refusal of application for abortion were at greater risk than control subjects for psychosocial problems. The unwanted children received more psychiatric attention, were more often delinquent, and did more poorly in school. This is just one example of how having an unwanted baby is simply not a fair thing to do to the innocent child. The other option is to have an abortion. Abortions, whether you're pro-life or pro-choice, not only kill a fetus or a child, but also emotionally scar the mother for life. Furthermore, out of the 50 million abortions that are performed worldwide in a year, 20 million of those are done through unsafe methods. This means that on top of the severe emotional trauma that having an abortion can cause a mother, sometimes a mother can also be forced to deal with physical injuries and can even be killed. In fact, according to SafeMotherhood.org, around the world, 200 women each day are killed because of unsafe abortion methods. Even through proper use of contraceptives, pregnancy is still a huge problem that forces life-altering decisions upon couples who aren't mature enough to make them. I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thanks, Beach. Pregnancy issues are present across all levels of society, but many of the issues actually arise from relationships. Relationships create another situation where sexual activity is present amongst young men and women, often with devastating, life-altering consequences. Many young men and women enter relationships at a very young age, usually around ages 12 to 15 for their first relationship. Middle school students are at an impressionable age where sexual encounters tend to be somewhat awkward. Think back to when you were that age, whether it was, at a school dance or in class or whatnot. There was definitely some sort of tension between you and the opposite gender. First-time relationships continue to hold this tension for the most part. Acts like first kisses and other physical contact are pressured on couples by other peers and the general media and whatnot. But lack of experience can lead to doubt and oftentimes poor decisions. Many times one individual wants this contact while the other does not. It's a very, very rare situation when first relationships have two members who are 100% mutual about their physical desires with one another. But once physical contact is established, oftentimes images on television and the national media are used to actually justify further sexual action. For some couples, often those with more insecure members at a younger age, this can actually lead to very young oral and vaginal sex at a much younger age, somewhat of a dangerous age. Most early pregnancies result from young men and women making poor, uninformed decisions in relationships. They have never used birth control devices before, such as the contraception methods that BJ talked about. So there's a much higher chance for them to use them improperly, and in that situation that creates a higher potential for an unwanted birth or a sexually transmitted disease, which we'll talk about later on. But one study performed by CondomDepot.com revealed that of the individuals who had sex with a casual partner in the last 90 days, 21.5% said they had had unprotected sex. Those who had sex in a relationship-oriented situation showed that 19% did it without any protection. So this shows that, you know, that there's still a significant issue arising from people having sex, unprotected sex, which could lead to some disastrous consequences down the road. You might not realize it, but most teens aren't actually having sex, even in these relationships. Based on the 1997 Youth Risk Behavior Surveillance data, which is YRBS, over half of all students in grades 9 to 12, that's 51.6%, categorized as in a relationship, indicated that they had not yet had sex or any type of sexual relations. This statistic is also likely skewed higher than it should be due to the nature of teenagers to lie about their sexual activity. So in reality, it's probably higher than 51% have not engaged in sexual activities. You know, because of, again, due to the insecurities that lie within most middle school age people. Another study performed by the Washington Post found that more young men and women in relationships are actually postponing sex. In 2002, only 46% were sexually active, compared to 55% in 1995, so it's decreasing. These statistics prove that in reality, contrary to popular belief, couples aren't rushing into engaging in sexual relations. However, those who do engage in sexual relations are still potentially threatening their lives with, you know, without using proper contraception and whatnot. Sex can drastically alter the course of a relationship, especially at such a young age. These poor decisions can lead to unwanted births, sexually transmitted diseases, and family dilemmas. Many relationships are simply ruined by sexually oriented activities, whether the couple isn't on the same page about what they want out of the sexual relationship, or, God forbid, something awful happens, you know, where you get a situation with an unwanted child. Many relationships end or are tarnished due to this, these sexual relations premarital. Imagine the pain of having to deal with one terrible decision you made on one innocent night for the rest of your life. Although it seems such a distant possibility for so many young couples, sadly, for still so many, it becomes a true reality. But after understanding the relationship-oriented influence on young men and women in regards to sex, we now should look back at another potentially dangerous side effect of sexual activity, and Jim's going to talk about that, which is sexually transmitted diseases.
All right. Thanks, Brian. I'm going to talk about STDs, sexually transmitted diseases. There are two different types, curable and non-curable. I'm just going to talk about a few in each. The first curable disease is chlamydia. It can be transferred through vaginal, anal, and less likely oral sex. Most men and women do not experience symptoms, but if they do, it occurs from 1 to 3 weeks after they're infected. One statistic is 75% of women and 50% of men with chlamydia have no symptoms. In order to realize that they do have chlamydia, they have to get tested. A person with chlamydia is infected from the time they become infected until treatment is completed. They can only be diagnosed through a urine test, or if they take a specimen and test it to see if they have it. If it's untreated, they can cause complications like PID or infections or infertility. Then there's second curable STD is Crabs. It's a small parasite that feeds on human blood. It's found normally in the pubic area. If someone does have Crabs, it doesn't mean that they're unclean or they're dirty. It can be treated with some type of prescription. Common symptoms are itching, which occurs 5 days after the person is infected. In order to prevent Crabs, you just avoid contact with infected people, bed lines, clothing, and furniture. The next STD that's curable is gonorrhea, or the clap, as most people know it as. It can also be transmitted through vaginal, anal, or oral sex, through performing and receiving. Men normally show symptoms, women do not. Men normally see the symptoms 2 to 5 days after they are infected. Just chlamydia can also be tested through a urine test or by taking a specimen from the infected area. If it's untreated, you can also receive PID or infertility. The next curable STD is syphilis. A person can get syphilis from another if they come in contact with their infected lesion. This also, they can get through vaginal, anal, or oral sex without actual penetration. The symptoms are basically the development of a sore, which, if it's untreated, can lead to a big rash. It can be detected through a blood test or a culture test. It's curable with antibiotics, but the preferred treatment is penicillin. Now, the non-curable diseases are, the first one is herpes. It's a common viral infection. There are two forms, there's oral and there's genital. Oral herpes, if the symptoms are, if you receive it, you get cold sores and fever blisters. Genital herpes, you get genital sores and sores below the waist. Can be controlled with various drugs, but you basically have it for the rest of your life. According to herpes.com, it's estimated that 80 million people in America have one of the two forms of herpes. And then the final disease is HIV or AIDS, obviously. That can be transmitted through blood, sexual fluids, or breast milk. A person gets HIV if one of these fluids enters the body into the bloodstream. A pregnant mother can transmit HIV to her child when she gives birth. HIV weakens the immune system, and then so the person who's infected cannot fight off any diseases that they get. So then they have AIDS, and then they need medical care to treat any kind of illness or anything that they receive. A blood test is the best way to find out if one does have HIV. Some statistics about any of these STDs in America. It's according to the American Health Association. In the U.S. alone, there are about 15 million new cases of STDs each year. Chlamydia infects 3 million. There are 3 million new cases of people being infected with chlamydia each year. Gonorrhea infects about 650,000 each year in America. About 70,000 new cases of syphilis occur each year. It's estimated that 1 million new cases of genital herpes occurs each year. And according to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, there's an average of 40,000 to 80,000 new cases of HIV reported each year in the U.S. It's estimated that half of all these new infections occur among people younger than 25 years old. So remember, you have sex with everyone your partner's had sex with. So now that we've discussed the potential diseases that may occur as a result of sex, it's important to examine the social factors involved in these decisions.
One of the most critical players in the sexual activities of young men and women are the social environment in which they are influenced by. Peer pressure, especially among young people, teenagers in high school, that plays a huge role in their decisions to have sex. According to soundvision.com, I know Brian threw out a fact about young people in relationships and having sex. Soundvision.com says that less than 50% of Americans under the age of 17 have reported not having sex. And also 6 out of 10 women that have had sex before the age of 15 did so involuntarily. So this goes to show that for those teenagers that think everybody is having sex, it's not really the case, and the peer pressure that they're feeling isn't really as strong as they think it really is. So it's important that for especially young people in high school, they have to try to avoid these peer pressures and try to just stand for what they feel is the right decision. Also, the media has a huge influence over young children today, or even teenagers. People today are very impressionable and obviously watch a lot of TV. Advertisements, especially those gauged towards alcohol, you'll find that they have a lot of, they'll put attractive women in the commercials, they'll put, for the girls, they'll put attractive guys. Those types of advertisements just gear young people's minds towards sex. And also television shows are the same way. They've become more sexually oriented over the years. FX has a show, Nip Tuck, you probably all know. 2 plastic surgeons go around having sex with nearly every woman they see in each episode. So that, that leaves a huge impression on young people's minds. Also, music is another area in the media that has a relevant role in sex. You'll find nearly every rap song will talk about sex and women and things of that nature in their songs. And today, it used to be harder for young people to get such songs, but now today with the internet and pretty much every kid in the country or in the world knows how to use the internet. They could download these songs very easily, and they listen to them over and over, and from a young age become I've lost that word. Impressionable. That's what I meant. As previously stated, also, pregnancy and STDs are a huge part of the social aspects of having sex. As BJ said, pregnancy, especially in young people, is a very tough thing to deal with. They have to make the decision of abortion, which that's one of the most stressful things I can imagine a young woman would have to make. If she chooses to go ahead with the abortion, there are the mental side effects that she's going to face for the rest of her life, most likely. And also, lost my train, hold on. Alright, also, if they go ahead and decide to have the child, then, God, where did I go? Alright, if they go ahead and decide to have the child, not the abortion, especially for young people, high schoolers, they're going to have to take time off from school, or they're going to have to just totally drop out. That's going to end their career goals and their future business objectives. According to govmaker.org, about 750,000 women between the ages of 15 and 19 years old each year have become pregnant. So about 750,000 teenagers in high school are dealing with these situations that they have to make that could affect the rest of their lives. I went to a Catholic high school, and my school's policy was, if you show, you go, basically. So if you become pregnant, once you start showing the signs of your pregnancy, they're going to ask you to leave the school. Similarly, living with an STD will cause great pressure on a young adult. Your friends may become afraid to interact with you, play sports with you, or things of that nature. They might be afraid that they can contract what you have. Magic Johnson, he was a famous NBA player. Back in his playing days, he contracted HIV, and a lot of his opponents were afraid to play against him because they feared that even the smallest scratch on his arm would open his skin and they can contract the virus as well. So, with all of these outside influences affecting all young men and women and their decisions about sexual activity, what can be done to ensure that the individuals don't put themselves in potentially dangerous situations?
Unlike any other generation, our generation has had the most pressure to have sex. This has caused a lot of problems, such as unwanted pregnancies and STDs, now known as STIs, sexually transmitted infections. So what's our solution? We say sexual abstinence. Sexual abstinence is refraining from the indulgence of sexual activity and sexual intercourse. Everyone in this room is an adult. We all have the power to make decisions for ourselves. So, don't listen to the mainstream media. And if you have a counterpart that's pressuring you pretty much, you don't have to listen to them. If they truly love you, they'll understand. There's other ways of showing affection, such as kissing, hugging, petting, going on a romantic date, go to dinner, take a nice long walk on the beach. They say that men think about sex every 3 seconds. Well, to get your mind off, why don't you spend time with your family? You can pick up a hobby such as coin collecting, play a sport, work on your scrapbook. You can also educate others about abstinence. Perhaps you're wondering why we're urging you to practice sexual abstinence, considering that sexual pleasure does feel great and that we're taught that sex is a special, intimate, beautiful moment. First off, as BJ said earlier, pregnancy. According to kidshealth.org, abstinence is the only form of birth control that is 100% effective in preventing pregnancy. Although there are many other methods that have a high rate of success if used properly, they do sometimes fail. Abstinence also prevents STIs. As Jim stated earlier, there are STIs that can be transmitted through skin-to-skin contact without vaginal or anal penetration, and also through oral genital contact. So, abstinence is the only way to prevent any intimate genital contact. As Brian stated earlier, relationships, they play an important role in all of our lives. Well, like I said earlier, if you can have a strong and meaningful relationship without having sex. Your partner should be able to understand if they truly love you. As Brian stated earlier, talking about religion, abstinence also plays another important role. In the Catholic Church, abstinence is the #1 answer to premarital sex. And as Matt stated earlier, sex is advertised every day to us. It's on the internet, it's in magazines, it's on television. But what he didn't say was that abstinence is also on the internet, in magazines, and in television documentaries. I said that we're all adults, and that we all have the power to make our own decisions. Well, sexual abstinence is actually a lifestyle choice, so you have the power to make that own decision. Here are some statistics for you from FG Women's Health. It says that among people between the ages of 15 and 19, fewer than half of them have ever had sex. Also, 1 in 10 women who are of the reproductive age have never had sex. Because we have our morals, we can make our own choices, and we care for our well-being, I urge that the safest way to take care of yourself, both physically and emotionally, is to practice abstinence.
Let's wrap up. I want you to know that I think there's a lot of very special people in this room, and we respect your decisions and your choices. And I thank you for listening to me to give you our opinion on this subject tonight. We just want you to remember that abstinence can start at any time, regardless of your sexual past. From virgin to the highly sexual promiscuous, abstinence can offer a brighter future for us all. Now, I'm sure many of you have heard the expression, cleanliness is next to godliness. I'm not going to get into the fact that the person who said that probably suffers from obsessive-compulsive disorder. However, our group wants to leave you with a thought that, in truth, abstinence is next to godliness. Now, I'd like to pass out an abstinence pledge here, and what it does is it reminds us, it shows our commitment to abstinence, and also can serve as a reminder to why this is so important. And as I do this, I'd also like to play you a song to show that there is also more positive things to listen to, and it also shares our views on the subject. Let me see that back. Okay, thanks.